can't touch this. Yeah, that's how we living, and you know you can't touch this.
From entertainer to investor to entrepreneur, we've got artist MC Hammer joining us right now. He's one of the mentors for the Wall Street Journal Startup of the Year series, and he is here to offer his advice for aspiring entrepreneurs. Hey,
hi, how you doing?
Thanks so much
Good
for being here.
Glad to be here.
So if Wikipedia is to be believed, and I believe you told me it is, you actually got your start as an entrepreneur, very young age, selling baseballs outside the Oakland A's baseball stadium?
That's a very true story. Selling bats, balls, doing deals with the ball players. They would leave me all of their extra tickets. Reggie Jackson, Vita Blue, all the greats would leave me all their tickets. They knew I would sell them. That was my business at 8.5, 9 years old. And I caught the eye of the owner. And he said, listen, you don't have to be my competition. I'm going to hire you.
Right.
And he brought me in and took me into the owner's box and told me he was an absentee owner. And that my job would be to answer his phone every game, every home game, and do a play-by-play broadcast back to Chicago to his office. And
Your first partnership.
Yeah, that was my first partnership.
And you got, in baseball's where you got your name, Hammer.
Yeah, I was named by Reggie Jackson, coined it, and he said I looked a lot like Hammer and Hank Aaron when I was a kid. And of course, there came a time where Hammer and Hank came to the Bay Area, and we took a picture as father and son lookalikes, and it was in the San Francisco Chronicle back in 1975.
Wow. So a lot has happened to you, obviously, since back then, you know, and you've had so many different businesses. You've obviously in the entertainment business.
Sure.
Now you're an investor. You're very heavily involved in the tech space. I'm wondering, though, how the game has changed, you think, for startups since you first got into the entertainment business. And I mean startups of all different industries,
Right,
Hammer.
right. Well, you know, there's a lot of similarities. So one of the things that I'm really always excited about a startup is that it's the birth and the creation of ideas, and that comes from the musical side of the brain as well. When you don't hear anything, and we create songs, we create melodies.
Right.
You know, entrepreneurs have ideas, and then they start writing code, and the code turns into these beautiful companies. And so it's that part of it that really excites me.
There's good times and there's bad times for everybody as an entrepreneur. You had sort of a personal bad time when you had to declare personal bankruptcy, and I'm wondering how that has sort of influenced your drive toward entrepreneurship since then.
That was very important because you know, in Silicon Valley, you learn more from your failures than you do from your winners. Sometimes winners, they just take off and you don't have to work as hard. But when you have a failure, you really got to figure out what happened, and that's probably why I've been really successful in Silicon Valley, because I'm surrounded by so many people who understand it. All of them are not going to win.
Right.
And when one doesn't win, you just got to regroup, refocus, and come with the next idea or the next program.
And keep your eye on your expenses always. I mean, it's, you know, as you start to get big, I think a lot of people just they think it's always going to get bigger and bigger, and they're not always ready for the hard time that's going to come.
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
it's all a part of it. You know, you have to, you know, the staff that you hire, the people that you hire, you try to scale accordingly.
Good point. Speaking of scaling accordingly, what sort of advice would you offer in addition to that for some of our Startup of the Year contenders? You know, all these incredible entrepreneurs competing to become the Wall Street Journal Startup of the Year.
Well, I mean, there's some great companies in there, and I don't want to lean one way or another way. There's a lot of great companies, a lot of great people involved. Yeah. My advice is that, again, it's a process, right? And when it's time to grow, take each part of the journey and focus on it. So you have to focus on scalability, but at the same time, the product itself is the most important. The user experience is very important. So as you go through, you know, the user experience, the feedback that you can get from the community,
right.
Utilize that to your advantage. Get that right. Listen, you know, some of the greatest, you know, Jack Dorsey, he's a product man. You know, he really gets product and design, whether it's Square, whether it's Twitter. So, you know, guys like that. Mark Benioff, a dear friend, he gets it. He understands. And you know, you look at what Salesforce is.
Yeah.
The culture. If you look at how Mark does his company, Salesforce understands social, but they also understand culture. And so in your company, you want to incorporate great culture as well, and you want to watch product and design.
All these names you're mentioning, I'm remembering we had a Wall Street Journal sales event, and it was raining afterward, and you were kind enough to give me a ride back to the Wall Street Journal in your car. I was struck when we were looking at your iPhone. I was struck also by how many photos you had of like politicians and billionaires in your iPhone, but I was also struck by how much you tweet. And I'm wondering, how is Twitter a useful tool specifically for you?
Well, Twitter is a behavior tool, and when Twitter was founded, I had the opportunity to go over and talk to the founders and give my ideas on what I thought they had created, and it was around enterprise. All my ideas were around we'd be able to mobilize audience, we'd be able to sell tickets, we'll be able to do all these things with this platform. And what Twitter does is it teaches you to process thought very quickly, be more efficient in your answers. I mean, think about it. You're probably going to work here. Your day probably started 2 hours before you got here. You're going to work here 8 hours. You're going to take 2 more hours to go home.
Yep.
So we're at 12 hours already. So you have to learn to be able to just look, glance, answer, and move on. Twitter is the best at teaching that behavior. 140 characters, say what you have to say, breaking news, breaking story, do I want to invest, yes, no, what are the challenges? And so that's why when you get companies who are also doing it internally, again, like a product that Salesforce has, it helps with the efficiency of the company.
Boil it down to the simplest message. Before you go, you've got 5 kids?
Yes, well, I have 7.
7. 5 with your
I raised a couple nephews too. Yeah.
If you were going to coach them and tell them right now one industry that you would pick for them to go into where you think that's the hot industry, what would you say now?
No. So you go into whatever industry you go into, you go in with a tech edge. So you use the power of social media to drive whatever industry you go in. So everything is being disrupted by technology. So whether it's the car industry, whether it's journalism, whether it's entertainment, you let social drive it. But the other thing I would say to all of the youth, not only my kids, I thought of this morning. We need what we call Friday Purge. On Fridays, purge your timeline. Go in and take out every silly comment, every bit of nonsense, because your future will be determined by your timeline, by your social profiles. Before you get a job, they're going to look at your timeline. So kids need to do this. Day.
Hashtag Friday Purge.
Friday Purge. Right. That's what I thought of this morning.
MC Hammer, thanks so much for being
with us.
It's a pleasure.
Take care.